What if I told you there's a single formula that explains why certain groups always win in the game of global power? A formula so powerful that once you understand it, you'll see the hidden patterns driving world events. Today, you're going to learn the universal law of game theory, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why one particular movement has become the most dominant force shaping Middle East policy. In a previous exploration, we examined how Isaac Newton's intellectual work laid the groundwork for Christian Zionism, a movement that continues to influence American foreign policy. But why is this movement so incredibly powerful? The answer lies in understanding a fundamental principle that governs all competitive situations. Let me introduce you to the universal law of game theory. This isn't just abstract theory. When you truly grasp this concept, when you understand its implications and subtle nuances, you'll gain a clearer and deeper understanding of how power actually works in our world. The formula is elegantly simple: mass multiplied by energy multiplied by coordination. In every competitive scenario throughout history, the groups that emerge victorious do so because they've optimized this equation. Let's break down each component. Mass represents the number of people involved in your group or movement. Energy measures the level of motivation and commitment these people possess. Coordination refers to the ability of these individuals to work together effectively toward a common goal. Here's the crucial part that most people miss: these three factors aren't weighted equally. Coordination is the most important element, carrying at least 3 times the weight of mass. Energy comes second, weighted roughly twice as much as mass. While the exact ratios can vary depending on the specific situation, remember this hierarchy: coordination matters most, followed by energy, and finally mass. When we measure mass, we're not just counting heads. What truly matters is cohesion, how much group members trust each other and their willingness to work together harmoniously. Consider Japan and China as an example. China has a population 5 to 10 times larger than Japan. Yet when we account for social cohesion, Japan actually possesses greater effective mass. Their society functions with higher levels of mutual trust and cooperation, making their smaller population more powerful in practical terms. This reveals an important truth: a smaller, more unified group can outperform a larger, fragmented one. Energy in this formula refers to motivation, but not in the way you might expect. While physical energy is visible and measurable, mental energy is what truly drives success in this equation. Mental energy is far more costly to generate and maintain. It requires the most profound level of motivation. Let me illustrate this with a thought experiment. Imagine 2 people. The first person digs holes in the ground for 12 hours every day, year after year. The second person spends their days in deep self-reflection, identifying personal weaknesses, and developing strategies for improvement. According to our formula, the second person expends significantly more energy than the first, even though they appear to be doing less physical work. Why? Because genuine self-improvement requires something incredibly difficult: admitting you're wrong. The 3 hardest words for any human to say are "I am wrong." Speaking these words means negating your ego, acknowledging your limitations, and committing to change. It means lowering your status among peers and risking the loss of face. This psychological cost is enormous. Therefore, groups with higher energy are those more open to change, more willing to accept their failures, and more committed to genuine improvement. We can measure a group's energy by observing their openness to acknowledging limitations and pursuing transformation. Coordination divides into 2 distinct types: conscious and subconscious. Understanding this distinction is critical to mastering the formula. Conscious coordination occurs when people follow explicit leadership, a single leader, a bureaucracy, or an organized hierarchy. Everyone knows who's in charge and what the plan is. Subconscious coordination is more subtle and far more powerful. It happens when people work together without clear direction or formal leadership. They move in harmony like dancers who've never rehearsed together, yet somehow stay perfectly synchronized. Of these 2 types, subconscious coordination reigns supreme. Here's why open conspiracies or formal plots are actually weak strategies, even though they might seem effective. First, maintaining secrecy is extraordinarily difficult. Eventually, word leaks out that certain people are conspiring together. When this happens, opposing groups are forced to create their own conspiracies, and you lose your advantage. The energy spent maintaining secrecy often exceeds the energy spent pursuing your actual goals. Second, in most competitive situations, explicit conspiracies are considered cheating. You lose plausible deniability when you're keeping detailed notes, holding secret meetings, and plotting together in rooms. Third, and most importantly, every person has an ego. Everyone seeks to maximize their own interests within the conspiracy, which immediately creates friction, conflict, and debate. This internal tension weakens the entire operation. Subconscious coordination avoids all these problems. It enables frictionless cooperation, maintains plausible deniability, and preserves secrecy naturally. Examples of powerful subconscious coordination include families, ethnic groups, and religious communities. Now that you understand the formula, mass times energy times coordination, the question becomes, how do you maximize it? How do you create subconscious coordination within your group? The answer might surprise you: tell a really powerful story. A compelling story serves two functions. First, it frames how people understand the world around them. Second, it acts as a script, teaching people how to behave in various situations without explicit instructions. Let me demonstrate the power of story through a thought experiment. Imagine we could present every story ever created to every person who has ever lived or is currently alive. We're talking about Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Disney films, Homer's Iliad, the Bible, every narrative humanity has produced. 10 years later, we ask everyone which story they remember most vividly and compile the results. What would we discover? Despite the countless options, most people would remember three specific stories. The first is Plato's allegory of the cave. The second is the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. The third is the second coming of Jesus. These stories are compelling because they're actually variations of the same fundamental narrative. Plato's allegory of the cave reimagines the trial of Socrates. Plato's mentor, Socrates, was forced to drink hemlock by the Athenians for allegedly corrupting the youth. In Plato's eyes, Socrates was a truth-teller who discovered reality through philosophy and committed himself to sharing this truth. In response, the people condemned him to death. Why? Because, as we discussed earlier, nobody likes being told they're wrong. The crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus follows the same pattern. Jesus was a truth-teller sent by God to reveal the universe's true nature. In response, humanity killed him. The allegory of the cave and the crucifixion are essentially the same story, told in different contexts. The second coming of Jesus is compelling because it marks the end of history itself. It tells us when suffering will cease, when paradise will arrive, and when humanity will achieve reconciliation with the divine. These three stories resonate deeply because they answer the three questions embedded in every human heart. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? This brings us back to our central question: why is Christian Zionism such a powerful force in the world today? The answer is that it contains the most powerful story available. This explains why Christianity has so many adherents. It explains why Christian Zionists are among the most energetic, motivated, and committed people you'll ever encounter. The story functions as a script. For Christian Zionists, achieving this narrative becomes a driving purpose. The story is so compelling and powerful that believers are willing to sacrifice their own lives to bring it into reality. That's the measure of its beauty and power. This helps us understand why Christian Zionism has become the most influential force shaping global events today. Those who believe in this narrative feel they've discovered the universe's fundamental truth, and they must bring this story firm. If this story is truly as powerful as I claim, then we should find historical evidence of people attempting to fulfill it before. And indeed we do, approximately 1500 years ago. Around 600 CE, a devastating war raged between the two superpowers of that era, the Byzantine Empire based in Constantinople and the Sasanian Persian Empire. This conflict devastated the known world. People were dying, starving, drowning in debt, and being sold into slavery. Religious persecution was rampant. It genuinely felt like the end times. During this period, Jews were banned from Jerusalem, their holy city, the dwelling place of their God, Yahweh. Throughout the diaspora, Jewish communities plotted their return. They had been expelled centuries earlier after launching 3 major rebellions against Rome. Each time they lost, defeated armies fled to the Arabian desert, where Romans dared not follow because of their aversion to the harsh terrain. In the Arabian desert, these defeated warriors maintained their commitment to eventually reclaim Jerusalem. They waited for the arrival of the Messiah who would lead them to final victory. While living in Arabia, they interacted with local Arab pagans, and a process of religious synthesis occurred. Jewish beliefs began merging with Arab pagan traditions. But as our game theory teaches us, the most compelling story always wins. Eventually, the Jewish belief that a Messiah would come to create an age of truth and justice won over the Arab people. This synthesis became the foundation for what would develop into Islam. A widespread belief emerged in the Arabian desert: a Messiah would eventually unite the Jewish people and lead them to final victory against the Roman Empire, now transformed into the Byzantine Empire. Back in the Jewish diaspora, different factions pursued various strategies for returning to Jerusalem. One group allied with the Persians, who promised to take them back to Jerusalem and build the Third Temple, just as Cyrus the Great had done centuries before. Initially, they succeeded. The Persians conquered Jerusalem, and Jews reclaimed the city, beginning construction on the Third Temple. However, there was a problem: the majority of the population was Christian. The Christians rebelled and called for help from the Byzantine Empire. At this moment, a new general named Heraclius emerged. He had usurped the throne from the previous emperor, creating a legitimacy crisis. Heraclius decided the best way to prove he had divine mandate was to reclaim Jerusalem and destroy the Jewish presence there. For the Jewish people, all hope seemed lost. They were being massacred. It appeared the Antichrist had emerged to destroy their nation completely. Here's where Jewish eschatology becomes fascinating. According to their prophecies, when all hope seems lost, when the Antichrist has emerged, when the Jewish nation faces complete destruction, that's precisely when the Messiah will appear to lead them into final victory against the Antichrist and usher in the Messianic age. Jews fled into the Arabian desert, searching for their promised Messiah. Several candidates emerged, but ultimately they chose one charismatic man who genuinely believed he was the Jewish Messiah. Much of his biography has been lost to history, but today we know him as Muhammad. According to game theory, Muhammad only needed to say 3 things to unite the entire world behind him and become an unstoppable force that would wash away the old order. First, he declared himself the Jewish Messiah, the fulfillment of prophecy, the promised one, the anointed one. Second, he proclaimed that everyone was descended from Abraham. Jews, Christians, and Muslims were all children of Abraham and therefore children of God. This land was promised to all of them by God. Therefore, debt, slavery, and landlessness were evils in God's eyes. He was the Messiah come to lead a revolution ensuring everyone had land, all debts were canceled, and slavery was eliminated. Third, he declared that religious differences were meaningless divisions. Zoroastrianism, Catholic Christianity, Nestorian Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, these factions existed only so the priest class could exploit ordinary people, and political leaders could divide and conquer them. Everyone was free to celebrate God in their own way. This principle led to the Constitution of Medina, where religious tolerance became a founding ideology of Islam. Because of these 3 declarations, Muhammad led the world's first global revolution against the established order, creating the basic structure of Islam. Muhammad died before completing his mission, but many Jews continued believing he was the Messiah because the prophecy appeared fulfilled. The Arabs reconquered Jerusalem and returned Jews to their holy city, reconstituting the nation of Israel. They built what they considered the Third Temple, today known as the Al-Aqsa Mosque, still standing in Jerusalem. And they did usher in a millennium of peace, prosperity, truth, and justice, today called the Islamic Golden Age. Many Jews converted to Islam during this period, and Jewish scholars became top administrators and officials, making tremendous contributions to world civilization. Unfortunately, the early followers of Muhammad were largely eliminated in power struggles after his death. I know this history is controversial, and we don't have time for complete details, but resources are available in the description for deeper research. To summarize, according to the universal law of game theory, Christian Zionists will emerge as the dominant power in the Middle East. They're already driving U.S. policy. They will eventually overwhelm both the American empire and the global financial elite. They will force the United States to send ground troops and invade Iran to implement regime change. They will essentially get whatever they want. It seems we've figured out history. It appears we can predict the future using game theory properly and systematically. We seem to have clear insight into history's trajectory. But here's the catch: game theory isn't that simple. When the structure of a game becomes obvious, when the trajectory seems clear, when the player's moves become predictable, when certain decisions seem inevitable, that's when a new player emerges who sees the contours of the game being played and manipulates events to benefit himself and his group. Hegel called this person the world historical figure. Nietzsche called him the Ubermensch, the Superman, the person who steps outside of history and seizes its reins to achieve his own ends, forever changing humanity's course. According to game theory, now that the game structure has become clear, the Ubermensch will emerge. And indeed, today we have such a figure who will manipulate the game to achieve his vision and forever alter human history. His name is Vladimir Putin. In the next exploration, we'll discuss who Vladimir Putin really is, what he wants, and how he will achieve his vision. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this analysis valuable and thought-provoking.